And good to have you with us in this edition of the Urban Debate. For the second straight day, we are going to continue with a special broadcast on prime time here about the mega cabinet rejig. Because while we focused a lot on the selection, the removal, the reasons for selecting a few of these new cabinet ministers, we spoke a lot about the politics around it. It's also equally essential to talk about governance. It's very important to highlight what you and I need, what you and I want as citizens, as voters of this country. So tonight, with the new cabinet in place, with everybody now taking charge of their new responsibilities, let's sit and talk about the big priorities for the Modi government, for this cabinet. Let's talk about some of the issues that need immediate addressal, some long-term policy changes, what we as citizens expect from these old and new ministers who are part of the Modi cabinet. So we've split it into 5 key priorities that various ministries and ministers together will have to come and see as part of the government. Point number 1, angle number 1, is obviously the battle against the pandemic, not just restricted to the health ministry, but that obviously plays a large part there. Angle number 2, all things economy, the fuel fury, the way the prices are simply soaring up, but the government seems to be in no mood to give any kind of relief. The jobs crisis, small businesses specifically, since now the Small Business Enterprises Ministry now has a new minister. Angle number 3, we'll talk about railways, often seen as a political appointment post where railways as a key ministry is given to an ally to keep them happy. But we have a very interesting choice being put in place in the current Modi cabinet. Why? What would we expect from this minister? What is it that we want in terms of better railway services and the key challenges there? Angle number 4, managing education amid COVID. And this is an extremely important one. Often it gets ignored unless there is a big noise that students create about college admissions or entrance exams or board exams. But there needs to be a larger plan for education and academic calendars during pandemic times and how we're going to go about implementing the new NEP policy. Angle number 5, the IT minister's changed as well, but in the middle of a lot of controversies. Your and my rights on social media, your and my privacy on social media, the massive face-offs with the social media giants, to what extent can we fix their accountability and what is the government's role? So much for the new IT minister to look at. These are the key priority issues that I want to talk about tonight. So let's start with the big one, which is your healthcare. First up, we need to very quickly ramp up on our healthcare infrastructure as we prepare for third wave. In fact, just a short while ago, the new cabinet had its first meeting and they have approved the emergency fund that was announced by the finance minister a few days ago. So a new fund has been set up of about 23,000 crore rupees. And they have laid out the timeline of 9 months to use these funds. That's going to be the first big task for our minister. And we're going to talk about that right now as far as the health is concerned. The need to speed up vaccination is the second part. Yes, we've picked up pace from the abysmal speed that we were at in the month of May, but we really need to do a lot more. Then there are oxygen, drugs, beds, all of these which need to be focused on, ramped up before COVID returns with a vengeance in the third wave. We have to keep a track of all the emerging variants, continue with our surveillance and testing. All of these issues, and keep in mind, we also have to take care of our COVID warriors. So let's go across to the panelists who are joining me on this conversation as we take this forward. I've got Abantika Ghosh, health editor for ThePrint, joining me this evening, GURDEEP Singh, SAPPAL, national spokesperson for the Congress Party, and Dr. SAMIR KAGALKAR of the BJP joining me right now. Let me actually go across to Dr. Kagalkar first. Dr. Kagalkar, it's some would say also a bold move in the middle of a pandemic to change the leader of the health department. And not just that, you've also given him another responsibility, which is that of chemicals and fertilizers. Now, is there a larger vision here, a connect between the two as we prepare with more drugs in stock, more healthcare infrastructure, more beds, more vaccines? How do you see this rollout from here on the big challenges that you've right now given to the new health minister?
Good evening, Tanvi. The first point that I want to make is broadly the vision of the government, its urgency, the focus stands committed and stands the same. There's nothing that you can call it in terms of a change, so to speak, right? There could be change in the leadership at the ministry level, but as the government is concerned, you have a consistency of focus, the urgency is there, and a very strong commitment, not just to sort of be prepared for the third wave, but for all practical purposes, prevent it. We use the technological advances.
Dr. Kagalkar, I think there is a bit of an echo problem with the system. We need to fix that so that it becomes easier for you also to make your points. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes. But I just want to go across to GURDEEP Singh SAPPAL, because it seems that the Congress party, Mr. SAPPAL, doesn't seem to be satisfied with anything. You were constantly questioning the government on various health policies, and today another jibe comes from Rahul Gandhi that is this going to solve the vaccine shortage problem? What is it that you want? If you're not even willing to give the new minister a few days to get things in order.
Yes, because the words that we use, the adjectives that you use were bold and vision. We don't find any boldness or vision. This was an acceptance of failure. Every single minister which had to do with COVID, health minister was removed, the chemical fertilizer minister, the minister in charge for vaccines was removed, the minister in charge for food supplies, who is in charge for supplying food for people, he was removed, the MSME department taken from country. So every single minister, labor minister was removed. So every single minister with this COVID relief was removed. So it's an admission of failure. Number two, let us see what the reality. You said the vaccination has gone up. Yes, it was 35 lakh per day. Well, it came down to 19 lakh. Then it went up to 29 lakh per day. And then there was a huge event, 85 lakh on one day. And what is the average of last 7 days now? It is 28 lakh, 23,000 per day. So we have again come back to 28 lakh. Whatever this government may say, whatever this government may submit to Supreme Court, it has not been able to follow it up. Now they have tried. Now they have tried to bring vaccination and health ministry together, and what they'll do. But today, the first two decisions of the cabinet belie our expectation, because this 23,000 crore, as you also said, was announced on 27 June by the FM. This is not a new declaration, where 15,000 crore is being given by central minister, union ministry, and 50% will be given by the state government. This is a much required funding. But what is the other? I'll bring in the other topic. Was 1 lakh crore for APMCs. This agriculture infra fund was created in May 2020.
Yeah,
it was created in May 2020. In budget, it was announced that APMC will be able to access it in budget.
Yes.
And today you again repackage and put it before people. And what is the utilization of that fund? I'll give you data. PIB gave a press release. In first 10 months, the utilization was 2%. 2% of 1 lakh crore. So these are not our figures. These are government figures put out by PIB. So that is why Congress is questioning the intent and the capability of this government. We congratulate the new minister. We hope that they will be able to do the work which earlier ministers were not able to do. But this is yet to be seen whether the promise is converted into action and delivery.
Correct, you're right. It is yet to be seen, which is why, I found it very odd that on day one, even before he takes charge, Rahul Gandhi had to make those comments. Dr. Kagalkar, I believe you are back with us with the audio issues cleared. Yes, go ahead, please.
If you permit me for a few seconds.
Mr. SAPPAL, I'll come back to you. Yes.
Yeah, Tanvi. Wanted to reiterate the fact that the focus and the commitment of the government stands steadfast. There is absolutely no change, no wavering, or no slowing, so to speak, right? And with respect to Mr. Mansukh Bhai, he's been a Minister of State in the Chemicals and Fertilizers Minister for the past 7 years. He has got a very good understanding of the pharmaceuticals industry, of the medical tech industry. He's been a hands-on minister, especially during the crisis. His crisis management in terms of ensuring that the oxygen concentrators have been moved, tankers have been moved all around the country, has been very, very highly appreciated within the government circles. That said, there is a very strong synergy between health and Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, under which the pharmaceutical comes in. Naturally, just to bring in more synergy, it's only natural that you bring in a minister who can handle both aspects of it. That said, just want to reiterate the part that it's not just about one minister driving a particular initiative. The entire government has come together. For instance, if you look at what the railways have done, they have ensured that the coaches were converted into quarantine centers. They ensured that the oxygen cylinders were, oxygen supplies were transported all across the country, right? So when you talk of addressing a challenge as big as this is a massive pandemic, once in a century seen pandemic, and no one is working all by himself in a silo. The entire government is working to ensure that the challenges of the pandemic are being addressed. Point number one. Coming to the next point, kindly allow me a few minutes and probably you can always speak. Coming to the next point, the fact that we have been working on it, we have been making announcements and implementing it is what the whole process is all about, right? It's not just that you make an announcement one day and the very next day entire amount has been utilized or used, be it an agriculture infrastructure or any other infrastructure. Just to make one more point, I'll come to it a bit later as well. For instance, the kind of a push on the infrastructure all across, be it railways, be it roads, be it ports, has been so high, keeping the economy, not only economy in mind, but at the same time ensure that there is a massive push and a support to the preparations of COVID and addressing the challenges of COVID. That said, the last point is we are not only just about preparing to address the challenges of the wave 3, but for all practical purposes, work in such a way that probably we should not, as a country, face wave 3 at all. Working closely with the states, ensuring that they get the support and the guidance, and making sure that the preparation in terms of the inputs and the insight that we got from wave 1 and wave 2 are put to use.
Yes, a lot of it will have to, work will have to come from the states as well. In fact, in the cabinet briefing, the health minister was asked this question that if you're talking about an emergency fund, which is meant to help us prepare better for the third wave, then why is your timeline for that 9 months and sooner? In 9 months, a lot can happen. And he said, well, it should be sooner than that. And it's really up to the states because the funds are available on how they use it. But Abantika joins me as well. Abantika, for the new minister, what do you see? Mr. SAPPAL, I'll come to you. Let me just bring in Abantika's view as well. What do you see as the first 1 or 2 key priorities that he needs to right away get on and get cracking at?
So I think his key priorities would have to be to work with the states and really prepare, because I know the government doesn't like to say, ever since Professor Vijay Raghavan was made to sort of modify his statement about the third wave, government doesn't like to talk about it. Never mind. They don't need to talk about it. But he should really get together with states and monitor the preparations, infrastructure, testing in rural areas. Because, the spread of the disease is the function of 2 things. One, of course, is how we behave, and 3 things actually. How we behave is one, variance is another. These 2 things, how we behave is, I think, campaigns and all have to be intensified, but that's not directly with the health ministry. But the third thing is vulnerable people, and that right now is probably the most in rural areas. And your biggest unvaccinated chunk is children. Your pediatric healthcare is certainly insufficient. So that is one very important priority area. And I think what really needs to happen is this business of central teams going to states and sort of loading over them has in the last 18 months, it's clearly been proved to be a futile exercise. So we should just stop doing that and instead make it a partnership and not sort of talk down to states. If you read the letters that the center is sending, do this, do that, one has to understand approaches. Really, I'm not being political, but the simple fact that the Kerala government is being asked what to do when Kerala really, it has a CFR of 0.5 case fatality ratio, and that our national CFR is 1.32. So maybe they should make it a partnership, really talk to each other and see what needs to be done, what states can learn from each other. I think that sort of partnership, one is infrastructure, and the second I would say is building a constructive partnership, because all of this second wave, all we have seen is politicking, be it about what happened, why the numbers went up, be it about vaccination numbers. I would have loved to say step up the vaccination numbers, but I mean, I understand that he's just come in. There are many things beyond his control. So, I mean, for example, the limiting factor here again is that we still have 12 crore doses available in July. June was the same. So where will vaccination numbers pick up from? So I think that's a little sort of, it's a little too much to expect him to step up gas on that.
Yeah.
But I think if he can just, and remember Dr. Harshvardhan in his last days had become such a scathingly and uncharacteristically political person. I think the new minister would do well to avoid that and just concentrate on the job at hand.
Yeah, one of the things, yes, I do agree with you, which didn't go down well with a lot of people, is that in times of a pandemic, you would want your minister to focus largely on that issue, irrespective of what the opposition has to say or anybody else has to say or ask. The response needs to be more governance related than politics related, for whatever reasons that did go up in the last few months. I just want to highlight, in a way, I agree with what Abantika is saying. First up, creating more healthcare infrastructure, and honestly, one hopes that it doesn't stop at the cabinet announcement that's come today saying, okay, we've signed off on these 23,000 crore rupees. They need to be used now, and they need to be picked up quickly to build this infrastructure, because otherwise, Mr. SAPPAL, we will look at another instance where last year we made announcements about these many oxygen plants, and 1 year later those oxygen plants were not built, and then we said, oh, that's the state's fault. It has to be collective work together to say, no, here is the money, we will give you whatever support, you need to get cracking, especially for states where there is a massive problem of healthcare infrastructure. Yes, Mr. SAPPAL.
I am support what you said, because this is too big a challenge, too big a calamity. And the states and the center have to work together. There's no other alternative. We have to work together. But I only want to underline two facts and one suggestion. Fact is that the vaccine rate has again dropped to 28 lakhs per day. That is unacceptable. B, in Supreme Court, the government said that co-vaccine will deliver 10 to 12 crore by July. And they have given a schedule of only 2 crore. So this promise and supply schedule needs to be looked into and corrected with the help of the state and center's own mechanism. Number 3, the states cannot be talked down. This government created 11 empowered groups in May last year. Then it again created 6 empowered groups. None of these groups ever met these officials of the state government. They never had any deliberation. Only interaction used to be at the level of Prime Minister speaking to the Chief Minister. Now they have today added 4 more officers to the empowered group number 4. It is good. We welcome it. I would suggest that this empowered group now should make a new beginning. Talk to the officers of the state. Make a common plan. Take their learnings. Give their own understanding and have a common strategy. Because this is a fight against COVID. We can have politics later, but let us fight COVID right now. The government has accepted it, and now it has made a new beginning. Let us appreciate and let us support that something good will come out of it. And last thing I wanted to say about Dr. Harshvardhan. His response to Dr. Manmohan Singh was not liked by anyone in this country. It was not a response which suited his own nature. He was always a good-natured person, a well-meaning person. But the way this government attacked all suggestions, be it given by Dr. Manmohan Singh or Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi or anybody else in the opposition, was the wrong thing. I think the government will make a corrective there also. Let us fight it collectively.
Well, I think Dr. Manmohan for sure would find solace in the fact that a lot of what he did say and did raise as issues and solutions was finally accepted by the government and implemented in subsequent days. So it doesn't matter how Dr. Harshvardhan responded when he ended up any which was, implementing a lot of those suggestions, especially on the vaccine import policy or allowing foreign brands as well. Dr. Kagalkar wanted to come in earlier. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to make one point on record.
Yeah.
I fail to understand how is it that on the one hand you say there has been no interaction at all between the center and the states, except the Prime Minister talking to the CMs on meetings. On the other hand, you say that officials being sent by the center to the state. Another panelist made a note of that the officials have been going down to the state and talking to them, lauding them. Let us make it abundantly clear. There are two things. One is the political executive, one is the permanent executive, the officialdom, the bureaucracy, right? So the kind of networking and the bonding that has within the bureaucracy is for everyone to see. And there's no way that anyone from the center would go down or lord over someone in the state and try to make it look like I know it all and therefore I tell you what to do. That has never been the case. If anything, they've been sent so that they work together, understand the issues, try to see where there could be common causes in terms of addressing the critical and emergency issues. We have had cases in Maharashtra wherein the officer made it very clear, abundantly clear. One phone call in the middle of night and the officers were able to sort it out amongst themselves. It was never made a political issue as such, right? So unnecessarily pointing a finger and calling it a political issue, overloading, stepping down, talking down to the state is completely uncalled for, unwarranted. Yes, there will be political unwanted questions and bound to be political answers to that. That aside, if the focus of the government has to be on the pandemic, it has always been there and it shall continue to be so. That's point number one. And with respect to my colleague, my friend from the Congress speaking on Dr. Harshvardhan, it would be extremely inappropriate at this point in time when we're talking about the issues at large, rather than commenting about one thing that's been a closed chapter, right?
Yeah.
That was a complete discussion altogether, a different thing, and no one knows for sure what was the reason in terms of what kind of.
So let me just say this. I want to end this back and forth right here because, well, Dr. Kagalkar, and you will also agree, the reason that there is a new health minister in place is obviously because there was something more that the government wanted, much to be desired, out of a health minister, and you brought somebody else in. So if you're going to reject everything and come to the defense of Dr. Harshvardhan, then it's a problem. But I don't want to go there. There is no more point. There is no more point in discussing what was good or what was bad about Dr. Harshvardhan's handling of the situation.
All that I said, it's inappropriate at this point in time when we're speaking about the issues that the new health minister and health ministry should be focusing.
Correct. So
not ending or sidestepping any issue that whatever would have happened in the past. Now coming to this point, as I said, let me repeat, Mansukhbhai has been a person who's been working in the pharma sector for the last 7 full years. So say that something who doesn't understand pharma or the pharma tech or the medical tech is something may not be the right way of looking at it. And of course, obviously, all of us would appreciate the fact that that brings in a huge amount of synergy, right, between the health and the pharma. And that probably makes him a more appropriate and a relevant person to be taking charge of this.
Actually, that's a point that you raised earlier as well. And this is something that we also internally discussed today, yesterday on the primetime show as well. Abantika, do you want to weigh in on that? This idea of giving health along with chemicals and fertilizers to the same person. I mean, at some point it will connect to drug manufacturing and policies regarding that as well. Is that at least a good concept to begin with?
Definitely it is. And in fact, you know, when you talk about drug manufacturing in his capacity as the MS in the ministry, he had actually, Mr. Mandaviya had been at the forefront of all of this, you know, remdesivir, making remdesivir available and all of that. He had taken a very proactive role. And, you know, the fact that he's going to have control of both ministries makes a lot of, there are a lot of advantages. For example, this Jan Aushadhi scheme, you know, that's one of the schemes that has really picked up during the NDA, the last few years, and to have somebody to have that synergy basically between the industry, the ministry, and you know, try and merge all of them, look at the projections here of disease data, of drugs and all of that, and talk to the industry. I think that is a very good move, no doubt about that. Also, I think, just the fact that this is a fresh pair of legs, a fresh perspective, even apart from the synergy, just the fact that there is somebody, because if you ask me, in the last few months, Dr. Harshvardhan did come across as a little jaded. So maybe apart from the synergy, the fact that there is a new man in and he has new views, and he's also, from what I hear from officials, he's somebody who's approachable, who listens to people. All those things, I think, would hold. I mean, he would be in very good state in that respect.
Well, since we've mentioned communication as being one of the core things that he will have to focus on, better communication to the people, to the media, to the political rivals as well. I think one interesting part from today's interaction was all of this cheap trolling that has been going on, regarding the health minister and his language skills, and it's completely shameful and unacceptable. And he was asked a question. I think the way he handled it, and the way he gracefully brushed it off and went ahead, it gives me hope that he's going to put more focus into what is the task at hand and what he needs to do next. So, vaccine shortage is still a big problem, Dr. Kagalkar. Just as we speak, we're getting information from Mumbai, from the civic body, that they're not going to be able to have vaccinations in Mumbai tomorrow because they've run out of supply. So there is still a lot of problem as far as the demand-supply ratio and boosting the supply is concerned, and that he will have to, at some point, focus more on and get and communicate it properly to people, to the states, and to the media about what the real situation is.
Yeah, I would want to add a quick 30-second point. All of us, anyone from the management background, will easily understand this is more to do with an operations-related issue, right? When you're talking of a OM kind of a problem, you understand that there is a limited amount of supply, and the way you spread it out makes a difference, right? Let's say you got 10 lakhs in your kitty today. How do you spread it out over the second doses and the first doses, and the number of centers make a difference? You spread out over 100 centers versus 10 centers, so that you're able to sort of give it to all the people who deserve it. And no, Mr. SAPPAL, there is a supply-demand mismatch. No one is disputing that. But the point I'm trying to make and stress is the state has the implementing agencies have the responsibilities to ensure that they operationally manage it really well.
Okay.
Making sure that they're related, not even a single ml of wastage. The Prime Minister himself lauded it, right? If in case people have forgotten this.
Okay, and I'm afraid I'm completely out of time. So I'm going to thank all of you panelists. We have 5 big priority spaces that we've highlighted, and we must move on quickly to the second one so that, we're able to address all of them. That's as far as health is concerned. You heard out the panelists there. The task cut out for the new health minister. It's times of a pandemic, much to do. The government itself has come out with, multiple new schemes, funds, already vaccine shortage that has become a big problem. So he needs to get down to business right away. Now let's talk about economy. The larger economy conversation that we repeatedly have, a lot of it has now come back again and is creating a lot of buzz, primarily because of the burden on the common man. Inflation shock. Across the board, prices are going up, from your food prices to your services to your transport. Obviously, as the fuel price fury continues to go up, you're month after month seeing spike even in your inflation, to the point that now institutions from the Reserve Bank to the other research agencies, all of them have started to say this could become the next big problem. And what adds to this challenge is the fact that the economy is already down. So if the economy isn't really growing at a good speed, but inflation is, that's just an added challenge. So we're going to talk about, one, the overall economy. We're going to talk about the small and medium enterprises. That department and the ministry has got a new minister. Narayan Rane has been made in charge of that. And so obviously the MSMEs are going to be looking out for what happens next. The MSMEs themselves are in a bad state. In the last 1.5 years has only added to their problems of more and more loans, so many businesses shutting down, unable to pay their own employees. They're having to realign their businesses as the demand has completely dropped out. We are also going to talk about fuel. Because even if the union government continues to hold to its view that they will not cut taxes, they cannot cut taxes, at some point they should review that. Petrol prices have hit 105 in Mumbai. Across all main metros, key metros in our country, they're above 100 rupees. As people begin to step out of their homes, people begin to travel, businesses reopen, economy begins to pick up pace, this will pinch us more. So let's talk about what happens next. What are the challenges for the new oil minister, for the new MSME minister as well? Dr. SAMIR KAGALKAR continues to stay with us. So does GURDEEP Singh SAPPAL. I also have GOVINDRAJ, ETHIRAJ, founder for India Pen and Boom, joining me. Govind, let's start off with you. A lot of buzz and speculation about a change in the finance ministry, at the helm of it at least, was there, but that hasn't happened. Nirmala Sitharaman continues to say she's got two more deputies. But there is a change in a couple of other ministries together who would decide how our economy goes from here on. What do you think should be the government's priority on the economic front?
So I think to correlate it with new people coming in, I'm not sure is useful, because I'm not seeing any specific change because of these new people coming in, because that would mean that what we were doing earlier was either directed or misdirected. So I think let's focus on what the larger issue is here. I think the larger issue is that we lack or do not have a strong enough economic blueprint. Now, there are two kinds of blueprints. One is a larger blueprint for the entire economy and where we are going. Now, the government could argue that they have one and they've been following it, but somehow I, as someone who observes this from outside, I'm not very confident that they do. The second is you did talk about small and medium enterprises. Now that's a very specific problem and unique to India, and is further split into two sets of problems. One is the challenges that small and medium enterprises have faced in the last year and a half because of COVID. Now, that is not something that anyone could have anticipated, including the government, and therefore maybe not much could have been done. But the fact is that we need two kinds of responses for small and medium enterprises. The short-term one is the band-aid problem, is really to say how can we make sure that we get better credit in the hands of small and medium enterprises, or those who run small and medium enterprises. Because remember, small enterprises in this country are really small. I mean, most of them are only a handful of people, and there are more than 63 million of them. So they're not really efficient, nor are they productive by any standards globally, and even for that matter, in India. So there is a band-aid problem for which we need a blueprint. The larger challenge, I think, is what do you do with small and medium enterprises going forward? And that is where I think we need some original thinking, because small and medium enterprises cannot and will not survive in this global economy, which continues to evolve, despite the fact that today, let's say, we have more tariff barriers. Remember that even in the last year and a half, you've seen companies in paints, in consumer products, in, let's say, adhesives become bigger, present better corporate results, and become stronger in many ways, not because the economy is done well or there's been a bounce back. Yes, there has been one. It's because many small enterprises have got eaten up or got edged out, and that will continue to happen. So we need a blueprint which says, as we look ahead, how are we going to take care of small enterprises in this country, or those who want to work with small enterprises, and how do we integrate them into the economic mainstream in a way that they're sustainable and they're productive? So that is really more forward thinking, which we have to address. Remember, we are seeing an unusual divisiveness in the economy. We are seeing strong companies become stronger and weak companies become weaker. Strong companies have done very well. If you look at the 500 companies, let's say, on the Bombay Stock Exchange and listed companies, you will find that many of them have delivered across industries, delivered spectacular results. So that's credit to those managers, Indian companies, multinational companies in India who run them. But on the other hand, the balance sheet of any small company, particularly in the non-export sector, looks back. So that's the last point. If our blueprint for small and medium enterprises, which are a backbone of this country, going forward, needs to be built around some competitive advantages, an export market, and maybe something that takes care of them and offers them a net when things go bad.
Okay, so let's pick up on that one and take it across to Dr. Kagalkar. Would you want to try and convince Govind that you do have a clear, decent blueprint, especially for the SMEs?
Not just about the SMEs, but if you were to look at it, the government does have a blueprint, government does have a plan accordingly working to it, right? First thing if you're talking of a band-aid, I would rather not even look at the band-aid kind of a thing, but rather look at the kind of a neediness of a segment. The more needy a segment is, the more attention and support it's been given to. It started off with first the most vulnerable segment of the society, the most poor and downtrodden who couldn't probably go out and earn their daily bread. They were ensured that 6 months worth of food grains have been given off to them, be it last year, be it this year. So now that the survival of those people, especially in those critical times taken, the next maximum needy segment happens to be the MSMEs. Completely agreed, understood, and aligned on that. This is where the government has come out with a massively big push. Putting across a 3 lakh crore of credit guarantee, right? So what the government is trying to do is, if you're asking, are they putting money into their pockets directly? Definitely not. Let us be realistic, let us be practical, and no sane economist would suggest that kind of a step. What is required, however, is going to put a good amount of access to credit at a rate that is not hurtful to them, in the sense that the banks don't take a hit, obviously because the credit guarantee is given by the government. Therefore, the MSMEs get better credit, good credit and faster credit. They're able to work on the supply part of it. And once you have a restoration of the supply part of it, then probably given the push on the employment and investment, you have a demand revving up. On top of it, the second bigger push on what Mr. Govindraj spoke of on the blueprint, I would want to answer that the government's intent is very clear. Push as much as possible in the fiscal deficit without any burden, without any constraint. Sorry, not a burden, without any constraint, right? Go maximum on the infrastructure development so that, as you would be very much aware, each rupee put in there probably generates you about 5 to 6 rupees in the next 4 years, while revenue expense, operation expense just about becomes 1 rupee, becomes a 1 rupee. So if you look at the push of the government this year, this budget announces close to 5 lakh crore of infrastructure budgeting, which had never happened so far. So the blueprint is very much there. That is number one. The second point that he raised, I would want to answer it very quickly, saying now there is going to be a trend wherein, the big companies would probably gobble up the mom and pop stores. If you want to look at the US, for example.
No, that's not the point that he was making, unless I got it wrong. I think the larger point was that some of the bigger companies have managed to tide through this pandemic in a better manner, and have in fact only, their books only look better now, whereas it's the smaller companies who've been hit hard because of the pandemic and the multiple lockdowns. That was the point that he was making. But let me just ask you this, Dr. Kagalkar, and because we've had a series of conversations since these packages have been announced by the government, there are not too many SMEs who are actually looking to take on any more credit, even if you give it to them at much better rates with better conditions. They're already so much, buried under a burden of loans. They don't see demand coming back. They are very, very, very skeptical to take on any more loans simply to survive. How are you going to solve that problem? Do you have any data that suggests that there are takers out there, ready to really start filing under these new schemes?
If you were to look at what's the kind of a demand push that the government is doing, for instance, all the PSCs have been managed to put aside about 25% of their procurement from the MSMEs, right? And this is the first kickstart, ensuring that the money comes to them faster. There is not too much of holding back of their payables, receivables by the MSMEs, so that their credit rotation, their cash rotation doesn't take a hit, right? These are the two things, if you were to start with, to ensure that they stay afloat at this point in time. And once obviously the pushing up of the demand happens at the economy level. We saw that happen last year. There was a sharp V-shaped recovery. I mean, GST started showing up 1 lakh crore plus month on month from October. It's only this month that it's dropped to just about 93,000 crore rupees. So the point is clear. The only long-term solution to this is ensuring that the demand in the economy grows to a very high sustainable level, and that's where the fiscal push by the government kicks in.
Okay, GURDEEP Singh SAPPAL wants to come in, and then we quickly move to the other aspect which everybody talks about, which is fuel. Yes, GURDEEP.
Notwithstanding Dr. Kagalkar's assertion that no economist will suggest direct handing over cash transfer to the SMEs. We don't agree. Congress party still says that there should be a direct help. But you see, the credit line guarantee that we have been talking about, last year it was 2 lakh crore, 1 lakh crore has been added to it. But in March, the government gave a reply in Lok Sabha. The government gave a reply in Lok Sabha that the total SME taken the credit was 520.
Correct.
Just 520. We don't know the updated figures. And second thing, 25% earmarking of orders to SMEs was a good idea. But what has your government done in last 2 days? They have added traders to the SME category. So it will be traders who will be supplying that orders. It won't be SMEs which will benefit from that scheme. The manufacturing won't go up. So there is a confusion in government. You bring out a scheme, that scheme only relies on credit transfer. It doesn't give any direct assistance to SMEs. B, you also dilute the bargaining power of the sector by bringing in traders. Now traders will eat into the pie, which was supposed to be for the SMEs. The government may have its own vision, but so the entire SME sector is up in revolt against your decision because they know traders will just source it from somewhere and supply it.
No, it's typically, Tanvi, allow me 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's not about pitting one versus the other, my friend. The point is, in as much as the traders have taken it, I mean, you're running a highline showing that the retailers' top line has dropped drastically in the last 1-2 months, right? So in as much as the MSMEs are a hit segment, so there is a segment among the traders as well. I mean, leave aside the very high-end luxurious traders, right? There is a segment that requires wealth. There is a segment that requires it to be a part of the larger chain, the value chain that takes care of the overall economic chain. So you can't afford to say that one has been added to the other, therefore one is at the cost of the other. This kind of a one versus the other is something that we must definitely avoid at this point in time.
Okay. Allow me to please quickly go to the second aspect. Yes. Okay, Govind, last word to you on this topic. Yeah.
No, I think, we have to acknowledge that things have changed.
Yeah.
Now, this is not to blame governments because governments, whichever way they could have reacted, did not anticipate COVID hitting the way it has. But the fact is that there is a fundamental constructional change in the nature of the economy and the nature of smaller enterprises. And that's, the fault lines have been exposed. We have to acknowledge it. And even as we find solutions, whether we give 3 lakh crore credit, which as is well known now, is not reaching everyone, because we're all small enterprises. Some of us, you call a bank and say you want money, and they say yes, we will give it to you, but at 17%. It becomes redundant. I'm saying that conversation cannot go further. So I think somewhere we have to acknowledge that the very nature and the construct of this economy has changed already and will continue to change. And therefore, as we think ahead, we have to think of policies which say that, 100 million people cannot be working in small enterprises because they will always be badly off. We have to think of how to create new employment, different kinds of employment, and direct the economy in a way that there is productive output and constructive output, and people at the end of the day have enough money to pay for their future, their happiness, and most importantly, their health.
But
that's my limited point.
But isn't that exactly the opposite of what this government believes in, that we will create an environment for more and more people to turn entrepreneurs, to start up their own small little businesses, to grow their own businesses, and we will provide you that environment?
No, I don't think the two are different. No, I think these are two different things. I think to say that there is a smart IIT Delhi, a boy or girl sitting in Bangalore and creating cool tech is completely different from someone who is running, a small automotive repair shop on the side of the road, or anything that some tier 3 or tier 4 supplier to a auto company, or or so many things that we know or define SMEs as. I think these are two different worlds. And the first world, which I spoke about, is very, very, very small. And that, of course, gets all the headlines in the newspapers. And I have no problem with that. I'm just saying that they will take care of themselves. But it's the 100 million others who we have to talk about, because they in turn support 300 million other people.
Okay, Dr. Kagalkar,
I completely agree with you that this is a new problem, and the identification of the problem is a must, and the government has identified that as a key issue. That said, how do you go about in terms of addressing it? The government still believes that, as Tanvi rightly pointed out, large number of SMEs, a large number of individual entrepreneurs need to turn out. Then how is it that you support them? The supporting them comes in the form of a cluster creation. Make clusters in such a way wherein all the CSCs, the common service centers, is picked up by the government. A sterling example of this happens to be the Uttar Pradesh one district, one product, wherein you allow the individual entrepreneur to come out with their product, at the same time create a massive common infrastructure. It could be marketing, it could be operations, it could be packaging, it could be training, exposure to national as well as international markets.
That is what I was talking about. This is the part of your belief that I was talking about. Yeah.
It is being done. I mean, therefore, we firmly believe that the individuals need to sort of drive this, but with a very strong common service support given by the government, be it the state or the government, and that's where we believe that the economy will take off in a big, massive way, supporting the employment for the millions and millions.
Okay, can I just spend the next few minutes on one thing that, you know, everybody's been talking about, which is the fuel price hike. Now, Govind, even though it's highly impossible that a change of minister is going to bring about a larger change in policy, but people are hopeful because such are the times when you have to pay 105 rupees per litre and, you know, get your bike's fuel pump tank completely refilled. You're just hoping that the new petroleum minister brings in some relief. But what are his options? What can be done?
So I think you know, it's tricky because, you know, even as we've been talking or complaining about about fuel prices rising at the pump, oil prices have risen, crude oil prices have risen, and now at over $75. So I mean, you know, even this situation is dynamic. So I think the equation is very simple. As we all know, there is money which goes to the state and there's money which goes to the center. Now, you could argue that this money should not go to the center and state and instead be shared back with me, and that is one argument. Now, the second part of that argument or question could be, then where does the government find that balanced money, whether it's the state or the center, if you want to kick it back in terms of either better health coverage or better, more investment in defense and so on. So I think I don't have a solution. I mean, and I don't have a very clear solution, and therefore I don't argue too vociferously about reduction in fuel prices. The third reason is, I think in a very I mean, it's really a devil's advocate in a way that you say that, okay, could high petrol prices deter people from using, let's say, fossil fuel based vehicles? And is that a good thing? So, you know, many countries, for instance, have raised prices and raised taxes. If you look at Europe, for instance, the proportion of taxes is huge. And part of it is because it's a green tax and they want to deter people from using fossil fuels, and that money in turn goes back to, let's say, fund infrastructure and so on. So I would argue that rather than focus on bringing down prices, maybe it can be brought down to some extent. Let's see how we can use the money that we are raising from that to actually spur other things, which is it could be an electric charging network, it could be subsidies for electric cars or electric two-wheelers, or other forms of infrastructure which make our country non-fossil fuel dependent. So that's the other point which I think we should also think about while we argue for a lower fuel price. That's what I feel.
Okay, so yes, and Gurdeep Singh Sappal, since your party does argue a lot for reduction in fuel prices, go ahead please and respond to what Govind is saying. There is a flip side to it as well.
It is not just our party. Every single citizen of this country is arguing. Even the BJP supporters, they may say something else in public, but you know, the fuel prices are hitting everyone. There is something called accounts, there's something called economy. Government is working on the basis of accounts. Wherever you have a shortfall, you collect taxes from wherever it is available. So today we have a situation where GST collection is less than 1 lakh crore per month, and the taxes on fuel is 40. Just see the balance of it. And it is being picked up from each and every person's pocket. It is having an indirect ripple effect on every single supply chain, the production lines. That's one part of it. Every single person, be it poor or be it rich, is forced to pay it. And this is unsustainable now. This is actually unsustainable. 105 rupees or 100 rupees in some states is something which even BJP cannot justify. You may say, just because you're not able to handle the economy, just because your growth has suffered, you are picking the pockets of poor people now. That is the sum total of it. So it has to be rolled back. It has to be rolled back. It is the same BJP. I don't think BJP, when it was in opposition, did not understand economics, and now it has understood economics and says that there should be a higher tax on the fuel. No, you understood economics then also, you understand it now also, but the fact is that economy is doing really bad and you are making it up, and this is where the money supply comes in. Congress party has been giving suggestions to the government, but problem is this government only knows how to troll those givers. It never takes it seriously. There's never a discussion, nor in parliament, nor in any other forum, what is the way out of it. We know economy is in bad shape. We know it has to go up.
Okay,
and
okay.
We know that
Right.
Not the solution.
So I promise you this. This has been an interesting conversation. So much more to that we could have covered. But tonight we are focusing on 5 different priorities for the government now, and this is just a part of it. So I have to wrap up at this point. Thank you to all of the panelists who have joined us right now. I think I agree with Govind on the argument that higher fuel prices can be a disincentive for people who are using fuel inefficient cars, or for people to find alternates to crude oil and fuel. But in a country like ours, where there is so much which is dependent on crude, and when the prices for everything else that you consume, everything around you that you have to pay for, also begin to go up because of a basic movement in oil price, then it becomes an aggravated problem in the immediate for the government. When the economy is down, when jobs are difficult to come by, when salary hikes are really unheard of, and when there isn't anything triggering a turnaround, if your prices begin to go up, it just adds to the entire mess. So there is much to be looked at in terms of relief packages for the lowest strata that has been hit the worst by this pandemic, for the businesses and how to enable them to survive and tide through this pandemic, and for the common man who's right now battling a big inflation issue. Completely out of time on this conversation. We've got 4 more issues to go. Stay with us.